Hello everybody and welcome to Amphlett Reviews. Here with a recommendation video, more of a thoughts and impressions than a review. I won't be doing a deep dive or a breakdown. I'm just more of a, hey, these films are available, they're definitely worth your time, go and check them out, more of a recommendation. So hopefully I'll keep this video short and sweet, but you may be aware of these films, you may not be. This is the Lost Bullet movies. I'm recommending Guillaume Pierce's full Lost Bullet trilogy that is now available on Netflix. UK, US, international, French-based, kind of Fast and Furious inspired, but more grounded stunt-based work, car stunts, a bit of fighting, scrappy kind of, long take kind of fights, with all about the practical in terms of the car chase stunts and just real kind of like destroying and wrecking these cars on the streets, doing some impressive kind of stunt work, and also having some pretty compelling, pretty standard kind of, revenge type storylines, with corrupt cops and, conspiracy and high stake moments, but all pays off by the end in terms of this kind of little trilogy journey. And my friend recommended the first one a little while ago, watched it. I thought the first film was pretty good. I thought it was a good introduction. I thought it had some limitations, in terms of what the film's trying to offer, but they follow on two sequels, with the third one just recently being released this month in terms of May, I believe May 6th or 7th, 2025. That just came out and dropped the final bullet in this kind of trilogy, which kind of wraps up this kind of like little series of films, which is start off from 2020, ending in 2025. So a 5-year journey from this director doing all 3 films within that 5-year gap, with the same kind of cast and crew, mixing up a few here and there with some new additional members. I always find the French cinema side quite fascinating, and there's been a lot of really interesting entries within that space over the decades. Obviously within something like Leon the Professional, of course, being excellent. The Taken films, pretty Americanized, French kind of style, but Xavier Gen's Frontiers, doing Hitman, doing his kind of French kind of new wave kind of, vision and take on that material, is one of the good things about Netflix, is they're taking big chances and giving reasonable amount of budget. Sometimes they are kind of investing in these films. Sometimes they're getting films they're buying from the French market and kind of putting on their streaming services. And we're getting some quite unique ones recently of these kind of like car-based kind of stunt action films, more hand-to-hand action films, John Wick inspired, but doing their own kind of, take upon it. I think 90 Minutes is one that's been recommended to me. There's been a few more that's been dropped recently. David Jane's also come back and done a shark film, which is getting a sequel soon, which is pretty cool. So there's definitely a really cool space right now for Netflix within the French kind of secondary wave, I would say, in terms of action-based kind of horror aspect movies, genre pieces, and it's been pretty fun. And I think this trilogy hasn't been really talked about, hasn't been really kind of seen out there in that kind of same kind of space. And it's interesting, this Lost Bullet trilogy has not really got this kind of same amount of attention compared to some of these other kind of big players in terms of my money, in terms of recommendation, in terms of your time. This is definitely a really fun little trilogy to check out on the weekend, maybe on the weekday with your friends. The storyline I think is actually pretty good considering all 3 films. It's quite straightforward. You've got dirty cops, you've got an organized crime kind of going around, and each film adds a little bit more in terms of the entries, in terms of the story point. And you've got our main kind of hard-ass character, ex kind of criminal that gets to work for the kind of the police in terms of a task force, very similar in the kind of the vein of something like Motorway, for example, which I think has very much the same kind of vibes. If Motorway was a French kind of secondary wave action series kind of franchise, this is what it would be turned into, I would say. Definitely in the same vibe as that. As mentioned, I think the first film, is a good introduction to these stunt performers, these, actors that really want to create a really fun little project. I think they do a lot with little. I definitely think there's some limitations to that first film in terms of some of the scoring, which doesn't quite land in some of those kind of really kind of intense moments, which kind of comes a little bit flat. But I think the performances are good, the storyline's decent, good characters, good bad guys as well, and some really awesome fight sequences. The famous one being the kind of the police officer sequence, the kind of interrogation leading into the kind of the police officer sequence, which is an all-round fight sequences between multiple people, which is great, and then leads into some pretty fun action moments as well, with the gimmick of him attaching a device to the car, which is pretty awesome. And all this is practical, all this is on location, and the secondary entries, the second and the third one, definitely ramp it up and definitely escalate it. Definitely getting that kind of budget increase, definitely going to be a lot more confident in what they're trying to do. And surprisingly, keeping your investment alive as well in it. You know, the second film recontextualizes some of the things from the first one, but definitely amps it up in terms of the fun factor. I think the story's pretty dope as hell and really fun and really fast paced, kind of in terms of, you know, getting a carriage from point A to point B to point C. Also allowing the film to breathe a lot in terms of some of the action, and definitely really just kind of throwing yourself in there kind of thing, which I think is great, and definitely adds a lot more of a crazy element with, you know, upgrading the attachment with electric, really funny. It has some really cool fight scenes as well alongside it, and definitely is a really good secondary entry continuation. But in terms of some of the stunt-based work, in terms of the kind of driving or the kind of destroying these cars literally on the street, which is great. Actually seeing these kind of real kind of on location kind of filming, which is actually really refreshing and really fun, and mixing up with some intense drama and action, and having some race against the clock element to it as well. And of course the last bullet concludes the kind of the storyline, the trilogy, wraps up the characters and finishes off this kind of 5-year journey from the director and our main leading actor in this kind of showstopper kind of third act, all out kind of finish, which is definitely kind of ramps up. Alvin Noir has been our main character for this trilogy, and I definitely see him being a much bigger international star down the line. I definitely could see him in like a John Wick spin-off potentially if they wanted to kind of go international in terms of the French scene, which they already sort of have within John Wick 4, but definitely this guy has a place within that kind of space, and I can definitely see some pretty cool further entries in him, and he's already doing this already, and some of these films are already available on Netflix already in terms of some of the other action films and other things he has been doing. So yeah, in terms of my recommendation, definitely check out the Lost Bullet trilogy. All 3 films are available on Netflix right now. It definitely has a really good conclusion, definitely has a really kind of fun kind of energy about it, definitely very self-aware at times, but keeping it grounded, keeping it simple, which is always nice, and having compelling, interesting characters, having some kind of twists and turns in places, definitely having some high stakes within the drama and the kind of revenge aspect to it, which is pretty fun. Some pretty kick-ass kind of close quarter, scrappy kind of fight sequences, which is great, but more based on the stunt work, action side of it in terms of the car work, actually having people in these cars on location, filming, doing these kind of chase sequences. If you like Motorway, if you like that kind of French kind of attitude, that kind of, you know, that kind of feel, and you want to see more in that space, definitely check out. So what are your thoughts and opinions on this trilogy? Please comment down below. We'd love to know you guys what your recommendations are for more French kind of thriller action-based films from Netflix, maybe outside of Netflix, that I have not maybe chance to see. There's definitely plenty in this space that I could be covering, and there's definitely more to check out down the line. So please comment down below. So in the meantime, guys, Amphlett Reviews, signing out.